All right. Welcome to the Lovecraft Easing Podcast. I'm Kaiser Soze, and our guest today is Delilah Dawson. How are you?
I'm awesome. How are you?
Good. And we've got Rick with us, Alan Hughes, Matt Carpenter. You guys want to introduce yourselves before we start?
Go ahead,
Alan? Alan?
introduce yourself.
Yeah.
My name's Alan Hughes. I'm a patron of the show and an artist, and I'm happy to be here.
He is our resident expert on Lovecraftian video games.
He's a teacher too. Are you off for Thanksgiving now?
Off for the whole week.
Yeah. Yeah, so is my wife. Yeah. That's great. Good. Oh, I like your t-shirt, Alan.
Oh,
Thank you. Rick.
Rick Lay, and I'm the resident expert on pulp magazines and horror movies before 1970.
And everything else also.
Yeah. Someone just sent me a copy of the fantasy and magazine of fantasy and science fiction with The Last Feast of Harlequin, Thomas Ligotti's the story.
What a great story.
Yeah, first time that was in print. I think 1990, 1991. So
Phenomenal story.
Matt?
Hi, I'm Matt Carpenter. I'm not an expert on anything, but I talk loud and fast. So I run Lovecraft Easy Movie Night, just so you know, because of the Thanksgiving festivities. My sons are going to be in town, and I won't be able to do one this coming Saturday, which is, I believe, the 25th. But the following week, December 2nd, we're having a super secret presentation that you won't get to know what it is unless you actually show up. Our prize this week
What is it?
It's super secret.
Oh.
Our prize this week is Visions from Brychester, a paperback copy of this collection from Ramsey Campbell, reviewing almost all of his older mythos tales like Cold Print and the Franklin Papers in their final forms with his commentary. Really nice book. If you want to win this copy, send an email to easyandprizes@gmail.com and put Visions in the subject heading. We generally draw a winner in about 6 weeks or so, so sometime after Christmas. You could be the winner if you enter.
Also has a novel in there, the Lackey novel.
Well,
okay.
I don't know if there's a novel in there or not.
The Lackey novel.
Yeah, the Last Revelation of Glocky is in here, but that's from its original writing, I think. Is that a reprint of his novella?
It's a revised version of his novella.
Okay, so if you didn't get the more expensive individual original printing of The Last Revelation of Glocky, it's in here too.
Well, welcome to the podcast, Delilah. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. You came to my attention originally because of your new book, Bloom, which is a horror novel. And then I was reading a little bit about you. I actually didn't have to go any further than your little about at the bottom of that page. And I was like, wow, this is going to be interesting. You're the author of so many different kinds of books, and young adult, and looks like comics and adult fiction. I won't pretend to know what all this is, but my son probably does. Star Wars, Phasma, Galaxy's Edge, Black Spire, and the Perfect Weapon. And then, actually, let me flip over to you've got it on your website, whimsydark.com/books. You've got a really nice list. So anyway, would you introduce yourself to our listeners, and then we can talk about your work and so forth?
Sure. So I'm Delilah S. Dawson. I also write as Lila Bowen. I have one series with Orbit under a different name. My website is Whimsy Dark because at the beginning, my first series was a steampunk vampire romance, And my editor was like, "We need to think about branding." And I was like, "I'm just going to write all over the place." And she's like, "Well, you still have to think about it." And I was like, "Well, everything I write is somewhere between whimsical and dark. That's my little lane, is that. And so I just went, okay, whimsy dark. So
I like
pretty much
it.
everything has some element of violence or horror. Even my least violent book of all, people are saying it's spooky. And I was like, really? All right, okay, cool. I guess we just can't escape maximum velocity to get out of that world. So yeah, I'm probably best known for Star Wars Phasma. That's what I hit the New York Times list for, which is just as much Star Wars as me, but they bill it as a kind of Mad Max in the Star Wars world.
Mm.
Then on my own, I know y'all kind of focus on horror, so I've got some middle grade horror called Mine and Camp Scare, and another one coming out soon. I've got the violence was up. Nobody knows really where to put the violence. It's kind of horror, kind of thriller, kind of women's fiction, but Goodreads had it up for horror. It was one of their finalists, so we just call it horror. And I've got Bloom came out last year, and then next year I've got two horror books coming out. One we just announced the name. It's called It'll Only Hurt for a Moment, and the other one is called Guillotine. That's kind of a novella like Bloom.
So, okay, I have a kind of more general question, stepping back just a little bit. We had heard from our pre-chat conversation that you were from Georgia, living in Atlanta. Could you tell us a little bit about how did you get into writing? What was your training, or did you just have at it and go on your own? How'd you get noticed? Those are the kind of things we want to know. Who influenced you? Who you influence?
This is
Sure.
great, Matt. I'm not going to have to work hard at all today.
Well, now she has to answer 30 questions right now.
That's okay. We can tie them all together. So I was one of those real lonely, weird, nerdy kids who did not understand other children. So I understood books. So books became my friends. The first book that really, really hit me and my kind of heart was Watership Down. And then I went straight into Stephen King when I was 10, read Pet Sematary, and I've been this way ever since. So I was always a big reader, but I thought that writers were, like nuns or surgeons, like people that knew, that had just sprung fully formed into life, knowing what they were supposed to do. And I was like, well, I don't feel that calling. I was a visual artist. So I have an art degree from University of Georgia, and I did murals and tried pretty much every art medium and kind of never found my groove, never found the thing that really called to me. And then I had my kids and I stayed home with them. And when my second one stopped sleeping, I stopped sleeping and I started hallucinating. I went to my husband and I was like, hey, just so you know, there's rats in the walls and they're talking. And he was like, you need sleep. You got like 3 hours last night. Your brain's breaking. So he said, we're going to get you a sleep schedule, but you need a hobby. He was like, you haven't painted since the kids were born. And I was like, yeah, because it's poison, like paint, poison, clay glaze, poison, encaustic, poison. And he was like, well, just use a laptop and write a book. Like, just don't need anything for that at all. And I was just like, my brain was so broken. I was like, yeah, sure, I could do that, because he'd written a few books and I'd edited them for him. So I'd seen that a human being could do it. So anytime that I was going to write, if he was available, he would take the kids to Target or the playground. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to write right now. So writing became like my escape and my refuge. In my first book, I couldn't figure out how to get an idea. So I asked him, like, how do you get an idea? And he was like, you just get an idea. Like, what do you mean? How do you get an idea? And I was like, I don't know what to write. And he's like, well, I'll email you a story prompt every day until something hits you. And the first one he said was a woman wins a free cruise and a free cruise and something happens. And I was like, well, I've never been on a cruise. I can't ride a cruise. And he was like, good God, like, you are creative, figure it out. And it made me so mad. And I was like, well, I've been on a ferry, so I'll write things about a lady that went on a ferry. So I wrote this just terrible
Despite
book.
your husband, yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I was mad. So I wrote this awful book about a woman who went on a cruise and accidentally slept with Zeus, because that's what Zeus does, and started seeing mythological creatures everywhere. So you'd see a dog walking down the street, she'd see Cerberus, and Hera wanted to kill her. And so I wrote this whole thing and I queried it and I got 57 rejections. And finally, this nice agent was like, this book's, you can write okay, but the book's never going to sell because you're going for the romance and chick crowd, and they will not tolerate indiscretion in a marriage. And you have accidentally made this woman cheat. So no one will ever buy this book. You should write another book. And I was like, oh, okay. Is that all I've got to do? So I just wrote another book. And then that one got 37 rejections. And then it got an agent. And that book was went to the editor's table 3 times over the course of a year and a half and didn't sell. And then the third book sold in a 3-book series, which is Wicked as They Come, sold in the Blood series. So that's my steampunk vampire murder romance.
Did you ever go back to those original books? Do you have them, like, you're going to rework them at some point? Or they just like, they were like just youthful sketches that you were going to use to learn from?
Um, I have so many ideas that I get really passionate about that going back to something old would kind of feel like work, whereas this new shiny thing over here that has not, it has no negativity or suckiness or stupidity attached to it. It just feels like that bright, shiny idea that might be perfect, that I just kind of keep moving forward. I also have the memory of a goldfish. Like I am all RAM, no memory. So I'm like, I remember the first, I remember the first sentence of that book. It was real bad. We don't need to go back to that.
So
All RAM, no memory. I love it.
how did you learn your craft then? I mean, like some people like major in English, or say they work for a magazine writing articles, or they just write story after story after story and just sort of hone it themselves, learning as they go.
I mean, I just read a ton of books. Like I said, I didn't have friends. I had books. I didn't understand people at all. But when I read books, I was like, oh, here's my key to vaguely understanding people and pretending to be one of them. So I was always reading. And then, of course, once I got serious about reading, I started reading like On Writing by Stephen King was very valuable to me. Story Genius by Lisa Cron was very valuable to me. I started reading about, Joseph Campbell and story arcs and character arcs and kind of absorbing those things. But yeah, On Writing helped me a lot because that's the first time you realize that, much like Cindy Crawford doesn't look like Cindy Crawford before 2 hours in a makeup chair, Stephen King doesn't write like Stephen King until the fourth edit. And that was super comforting. We were like, oh, well, if he's not perfect, then I can be imperfect. I can just write a real crappy first draft and then fix it later.
That right there is
very
what
magical.
so many writers and creators uh, get hung up on. They think they've got to
Yeah.
write that perfect first draft, and that's
Yeah.
exactly what you don't do. Yeah,
No, you can fix a real crappy first draft, but you cannot fix, a flawless one pager that never goes anywhere.
yeah. So, how long did it take you to go without sleep to get into the hallucination phase?
Well, see, like I said, number one, I already told you I don't have a great memory, and number two, I'm not organized. So it wasn't like I was taking notes or keeping a diary. I had two children under 3. I was just trying to, we had the room blocked in with baby gates, and I would just lay on the floor and be like, "Please don't die," you know. Um, so he was around 9 months old, so it was probably a good month and a half where you go from getting 6 hours a night of sleep as a new mom to like 3.5, where just the world starts to break around you.
It's interesting because uh, we're going to be interviewing Victor Laval about his new series, The Changeling, and the book, and he narrates the show,
Oh wow.
and he talks about uh, one part of the show is how long after this long without sleep this happens, and after this long without sleep this happens. So yeah, it's on my mind. Great show, by the way, if anyone out there is listening who hasn't watched it yet. It's on Apple. Got anything to say, Matt?
No, I'm just waiting to
Okay.
hear more about, like, you say you read a ton. Do you have like
Yeah.
your 5 top books?
Um, I mean, I
Or
can tell you
sort of?
books that were really formative to me.
Yeah,
I,
sure.
like Watership Down. I mean, I've got a Black Rabbit of Inlay tattoo. It clearly means a lot to me. But that book, I saw the video in the video store, and I told my dad I wanted to rent it when I was, I think 8. He said, "Oh no, that's way too violent. That's based on a book. You can't watch that movie." So I was like, "Okay, based on a book, I can handle that." So I went to the library and pulled down the tome and took it up front, and the librarian was like, "Oh, you can't read that. That's too violent. You have to be in 5th grade to read that." And it just made me mad, so I stole it.
I
Because
love it.
back in 1985, we didn't have electric scanners. They wrote your name on a card and prayed you bring it back. So
Oh
I was
yeah.
just like, I took it. I took the book and I took very nice care of it and kept it under my
Wait,
pillow.
did you give it back?
Oh yeah. Oh no,
Okay.
I'm a little doobie. I couldn't live it with my conscience if I didn't give it back. But I stole it. I took good care of it. I put it right back exactly where it went on the shelf. I don't think anybody ever knew about it. If Mrs. Span ever found out, the librarian, I'm real sorry.
So my
I have
mom
this idea of some
took a book out of the
person looking
Columbus
it up in
Library
the
when I
file
was like
cabinet.
Hang
3
on,
or
one at a
4.
time, guys. What, Rick?
Yeah, I have this nightmare of some poor person looking at it up in the card catalog, going to the bookshelf and not finding it.
Well, I read it in a week, so it's not like it was a real long time for a book to be gone.
Okay.
Like fast
Yeah.
reader.
And
My
then
mom
later
took a
in
book
life,
from the
she
library
read
when we were
the
kids.
Stephen King story, what's the one about the librarian?
Library policeman.
The library policeman, yeah. Sorry, Matt, what?
Oh, my mom took a book out of the library for us kids when I was maybe 4, And it's like 15 years later, we moved to Cincinnati. She goes to get a library card, and they practically call the cops and say, "US $4.75 for this book." They never let go of those
$4.75.
librarians.
Wow. You're so fun to talk to. The rats in the walls and the
Yeah, okay, but I was supposed to say 5 books. I would say probably Watership Down.
yes.
And then Pet Cemetery, which I saw my mom was reading it by the pool, and I almost drowned because I was, playing in the pool by myself, and she didn't even see me. I'm like, and like she's just intent on this book, and I was like, what is this book that is so good that my mom almost let me die? And I'm like, Pet Cemetery, can I read that? And she was like, oh no, it's way too scary for you. So she put it back, in the house library, and I was just like, zoop. So that was very formative. Reading that at 10 was very, very formative. Then I read it right after that. And then she encouraged me to read Clan of the Cave Bear by Jean Auel, which is, a really great historical adventure. And then I found the second book, Valley of Horses, in the used bookstore for like 75 cents. And I brought it home thinking like, oh, it's got this big chunky book. It's this historical fiction my mom urged me to read. I was in 6th grade at the time. Valley of Horses is erotica. Like if Clan of the Cave Bear is thoughtful historical fiction, Valley of Horses and the rest of them are just cavemen getting it on everywhere. I was reading that book and I was like, oh my God, I didn't know you were allowed to do this. Like you can write a historical fiction book and just have a bunch of, and I was like, what if the teachers see me reading this? So I would like put it inside my math book and be like, I'm reading a math book. So that was pretty formative for me.
Reminds me of a friend of mine when I was in medical school. She would take her copy of Cosmopolitan on the bus and put it between the covers of the New England Journal of Medicine. And so she would be commuting, young doctor reading New England Journal of Medicine, and she's flipping through her Cosmo.
Yeah, there's definitely some shame around these things, especially in earlier years. And then I felt the same way when I read Charlene Harris's Dead After Dark, where you're reading that and you're like, wait, we're allowed to make redneck vampires? Like I'm from Georgia, I'm country adjacent, and I was like, I'd never heard of that. So it's like the books that affected me so hard were the ones where you're like, oh, I didn't know we were allowed to do that. I didn't know we were allowed to be that scary, that weird, that dark. Rabbits could talk. So those are probably 4 of my. And then Outlander was the same way, where I read that and I had I think I got one of the early coronaviruses or swine flus back in like 2000, where like 3 months I was just out. I couldn't walk to the mailbox. So I was reading whatever big books I could find, in the 10 minutes I could walk around of a used bookstore before I collapsed. And so I read all of the Outlander books before they became a huge thing. And it was just like, I didn't know you were allowed to do this, like well written, well researched, historically accurate. And then it's just a lot of sex.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talking about books where you're, as you say, you didn't know that, you could do this, you could do that. And then the difference between, I think you said your first editor saying, no, you can't have the heroine sleep with Zeus because she's married, so.
Well, yeah, that's a difference between, like, if you do a good enough job, you can get away with anything.
Right.
If you are breaking a trope within a genre that you should know better because you should be reading in your genre, there's some tropes that the genre readers will not tolerate. And so that was just kind of more of a beginner's mistake, because I wasn't reading, chick lit. I wasn't reading romance at the time. I just, lots of early writers have that thought of like, I don't read this, but I can improve it. And it's like, no, honey, you got to read it if you want to improve it. That was mea culpa on that one.
I remember stumbling on, when I was 9 or 10, in the public library, on the Gore series, and
Lord, please don't.
I was like, wow, okay, I learned a few things.
I just read a middle grade book I was moderating a panel at New York Comic Con of YA horror. And so I read all the books beforehand so I could, ask appropriate questions. But I read this book called Bride of the Tornado by James Kennedy. And it was that same thing where you're like, this book was so interesting. And I was like, if you had described to me what happened in this book, or I read a synopsis, I'd have been like, oh, bull crap, man, nobody can make that work. That's insane. And then I read it and I was like, oh my God, it's so good. So yeah, those are my favorite books, are the ones that like make you realize that if you're good enough and if you nail it hard enough, you can do anything you want.
So when you were learning to be a writer, when did you decide you needed an agent, for example? Or do you have an agent?
From
or
the start,
personal friends or editors?
Nope. I from the start I wanted to be traditionally published. I don't want to say I'm lazy, but I'm pretty much aware of the things I'm not great at, and selling things to people and math are 2 of them. So the thought of having to do all the work behind self-publishing, just I found terrified. I wanted to be traditionally published. So the very first book I wrote, I was like, what the hell? Let's query it. Let's see what happens. And what happens is you get a lot of rejections. And then a couple of them were very kind and helpful. So I learned how to write a query, and then I learned how to take rejection, which, former gifted kid, I was not great at. So of course the biggest thing there is like, once you start querying, if you start writing the next book, you will think of the old book as like, oh, that old thing, like nobody cares about that. This is the new hotness. So yeah, I was kept writing while I was querying. But I learned all of that online, like Query Shark. I read every single query that was on there. And I still do, like I still find it pretty interesting. It's almost like reading the gossip column for writers, just watching queries get torn apart. But this was 2010, 11. So the world was kind of set up differently in regards to, we all had forums we could talk on. Twitter was full of agents and editors just constantly spitting truths. Like there was so much valuable free information out there for people who wanted to get published.
Yeah, Twitter's changed.
Do you have a schedule that you adhere to? I mean, talking about the way that you talk, maybe not, but like I know some people who are teachers will like get up at 4:30 a.m. and then that's their writing time till they go to school. I'm just saying. I just was curious. Like some people just write when the whim hits them. I know Caitlin Kiernan is lucky if she gets out 700 words in a day, but other people have a set time. I was wondering, what's your routine?
I have two neurodivergent teenagers that I've always been kind of the main, I would stay home while my husband went out and did his work. So I've been the main carer for them pretty much. So it's, my schedule changes around their schedule. There were years where I was, kind of dropping them in and out of preschool, and, I'd have maybe an hour to myself at the coffee shop. Then there were years where they would get on the bus at 7:15 in the morning and not come back in 4:30 in the afternoon. And I just had like this glorious amounts of time where nobody spoke to me. And it was like, oh, this is beautiful. And these days I have a teenager in high school and one in community college. So basically, every day I aim to write 2,000 to 3,000 words. Or if I'm editing, hit, at least 50 pages editing. And then I tell myself like, that's all you got to do today. That's your whole job. So whenever I'm able to get that in, I do. And sometimes I can hand it in the morning. Sometimes at 7 o'clock, I have to be like, sorry, family, feed yourself. I have to do this now. But I have to be asleep around 11 o'clock at night, and I need to wake up around no earlier than 7 in the morning unless I'm traveling. So I don't have a schedule so much as I need my sleep, or I'm real mean.
I want to go over the books that you've written, the different series and so forth. But before I do that, can we tell the audience about your latest book, Bloom?
Oh yeah, Bloom.
That is the latest, right?
Yes, I had 4 books out this year, but that is the latest one.
Okay.
So my daughter is 17. She is the coolest person I know. If you follow my Instagram, you can see pictures of us at the Cure concert together where she completely gothed me out. Like I'm kind of mom goth left over from the 90s, but like she did my makeup for me. But I've been big into Hannibal for a long time. That's like the only thing I painted in, I guess, probably 20 years. I did a Hannibal painting because I wanted to hang it on the wall. So she got into it. You can't make your kids get into anything. If you're like, oh, you're going to love this, it's cool. They're like, note to self, never look at that thing ever.
Right.
So she got into Hannibal independently. She loved it. We were talking about it. And one day she was like, could you explain to me why all the hot serial killers are men? She was like, all of them, like Hannibal and, Joe and you and Dexter and Norman Bates. Like she was like, they're all dudes. And I was like, okay, well, number one, statistically speaking, most of the serial killers that are caught are men, which maybe that's because most of them are men, or maybe because the women don't get caught. But like statistically speaking, it's accurate. And number two, I'm sorry, but I'll write you a book. So I set out to write a book that had the female 2 girls, but with the Hannibal kind of dynamic. And I wanted it to be, a different kind of serial killer that was very beautiful, cottagecore, thoughtful, sweet. Like this girl would kill it on Instagram. So that's what became Bloom. And I have a lot of non-competes. So the only thing that was left that I could write was a novella, which is why it's novella length instead of full length.
Well, let me just read the synopsis on Amazon. Rosemary meets Ash at the farmer's market. Ash, precise, pretty, and practically perfect, sells bars of soap in delicate pastel colors, sprinkle spackled cupcakes stacked on scallop stands. I love the alliteration. Beeswax candles, jelly jars of honey, and glossy green plants. Rose never felt this way about another woman. With Ash, she wants to be her and have her in equal measure. But as her obsession with Ash consumes her, she may find she's not the one doing the devouring. So, yeah. So, yeah, check that out. Paul read it. Let's see who Josh Mallerman read it. Rachel Harrison. And yeah, I like Paul's review. A dizzying, heady feast for the discerning palate. I devoured this book in one greedy sitting, which gives you even more clues as to what the book may be about. So, yeah. What are your what are the other three books that came out this year?
So let's see. The first one is my latest Star Wars book, which is Star Wars Inquisitor: Rise of the Red Blade, which is the story of how a Jedi Padawan becomes an Inquisitor. Also kind of a learning your neurodivergent story. Seems to be working for people there. And then we had Disney Mirrorverse Pure of Heart, which is based on the Disney Mirrorverse mobile game. So it's basically they take all of the different Disney characters and Pixar characters are in the game together. So you've got Snow White, Tiana, Rapunzel, Hades, Stitch, and Sully all hanging out together, but they all have the kind of skills you would have if you tried to turn them into D&D characters. So there are healers and tanks and sorcerers. And so it's got a little twist of horror on it. It starts with Snow White kind of, the woods are darker than usual. Animals are showing up, hurt, and she has to help them. And then she goes home, and then the dwarfs try to kill her, and then she has to kill them instead. So got to give Snow White a giant axe. The third book is Midnight at the Houdini, which is probably my least violent book, but it's based on kind of Sleep No More and The Tempest, and it's about a girl who gets lost in this hotel that you can't escape. And if you don't escape by midnight, you turn into a ghost there. But it's very kind of like speakeasy, close-up magic, old Hollywood, Las Vegas style kind of stuff, which I'm hearing is kind of, people are thinking it's spooky. And I was like, but I thought it was pretty sweet though. And then the fourth one is Bloom.
So tell me about, you've written so many different genres, you might say. For example, what got you writing Star Wars? Take that one first.
Well, I've always been a really big Star Wars fan. I was really big into the Ewoks. Like I still have my Princess Nisa in the corner over there. But my friend Chuck Wendig tweeted, "Oh, I'd like to write a Star Wars book one day," and I was like, "Oh my god, I didn't know you could do that." And then within the year, Aftermath had come out, and so I tweeted like, "I want to write a Star Wars book," and it was like crickets. But so I had my agents send books to the Star Wars editors. I met them at Phoenix Comic Con. I asked some different friends who write for Star Wars to put in a good word with me, and then finally I got the invite to write. The Perfect Weapon was my first Star Wars work, which is a novella based around The Force Awakens. So it was something I really, really wanted, but I really enjoy it. I do a lot of IP work and enjoy like playing in those worlds.
Yeah, it seems to me that a new writer could learn a lot by emulating what you've done if they don't want to do the self-published route. I mean,
yeah, you just have to be real fast. Like Star Wars books, you have to be able to write 120,000 words in about 45 days or less. So
that's
you definitely
fast.
have to work up to it. But I think like my first IP was I got invited to write Shadow Man for Kindle Worlds when it first came out. And then I got into a Hellboy anthology. So it's kind of like a clawing your way up the IP ladder.
And let's see, I see Minecraft Mod Squad.
Yeah.
Mob Squad, sorry.
Yeah, that was pitched as Goonies in the Minecraft world.
Okay, so what's the plot of this book? And why Minecraft? You really into Minecraft as well, or?
My kids were at the time. So
Yeah,
Minecraft is owned by the Del Rey, who is the Star Wars IP folks. I work with Del Rey a lot. Really good folks. But they kind of reached out because they had a Minecraft story coming up that was set in the Nether, which is kind of like Minecraft hell. And I was like, oh, so they thought of me because I kind of write violent stuff. Anyway, someone else got that pitch. I don't even think the book ever got written, but they liked talking to me. And they're like, oh, well, you can pitch anything you want. So I was like, I haven't seen the Goonies in the Minecraft world yet. Like a group of kids who live there and get together and have an adventure. So it's about these kids who are kind of the misfits in their town, and they've always been friends. Their parents don't really get them. One is clearly autistic. One clearly has ADHD. One is, the big tough kid that looks like the bully but is really super soft inside. But they live in a town with a huge wall around it, and they're never ever ever allowed to go outside of the wall. And there's torches everywhere, because if there's not light, then monsters spawn in Minecraft. So their whole world is nothing but inside of this wall lit with torches all the time. They've never even seen full darkness. And then they have to go beyond the wall and learn all of the stuff you learn in Minecraft, because they have to save their town. So it's one of those, the kids have to save the town from the bad guy, while also learning that, like, zombies exist.
My son's 21 and he's been playing Minecraft since he was 9 or 10, and he still does. And it just strikes me every time I watch him play, the fiction possibilities in Minecraft. And the other thing that I always think of is that they say each world, each map that is spawned is approximately the size of the planet Neptune, and that just blows me away.
It's such a neat game in the way that you can play it for the fighting, you can play it for the building,
right.
You can play it for the creation, you can play it for just being goofy. But it was super nice to be able to say to my kids, like, hey, can you come show me how redstone works? And then my son is like, oh yeah, let me explain everything to it. It was really cool bonding for us. When I play Minecraft, I get violently ill. I get very motion sick. So I would take you to a bean and be like, all right, son, show me everything.
Yeah, and he's done all of those things. He's gone into creative mode, and just for the pure in the pure building aspect of it. And right now he's in some sort of oh God, I don't know what it is, but basically you have to go in there at least once a day, and you're running through this dungeon and you're trying to collect things on this server. So I don't know. That's a very bad explanation of what he's doing. He'd probably roll his eyes if he heard this.
Yeah, no, my son plays bed games or something like that, where you're like, all right, you just blow up people's bed. That's what you're doing with your life. Cool. Okay. But you get so few times in your life that you want, my kid could think I'm cool for 30 seconds, because nothing I do, they're just yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Not impressed by any of it.
Yeah. What about the comic books?
Yeah, I had a good run there, where I was working with IDW and Boom. So I have some creator-owned comics. I have one called Lady Castle, one called Sparrowhawk, and one called Starpig. And then I've written for Star Wars, Adventure Time, X-Files. I wrote a lore comic with Aaron Mahnke based on the Lore podcast. Let's see, I did a Rick and Morty one shot. I'm working a little bit with DC right now. We just announced I'm going to be in a Batman coming up. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Tell me about that. That's
great. I can't. I think all they've announced is that I'm on the books. It popped up yesterday, and I was like, oh, we're announcing that. Awesome, cool, okay.
Awesome.
But yeah, it's and I love writing. Some stories. It's, I don't know, especially Sparrowhawk, which I think is probably one of the ones that's closest to my heart. It's just, it wouldn't really work as a novel, but it worked so well with the artist that they chose. It's basically, we call it Victorian Fairy Fight Club. It's about a girl who gets sent to fairy, and the only way to escape fairy is to keep killing fairies until you become powerful enough to break free. But it also turns you into a fairy. So she's killing these things, and she starts growing wings. So it's if you like acid green fairy blood all over the place, it was super fun to write.
Well, speaking of superheroes, you've got, this is the first time I've heard of this. I'm going to buy this, but you're in a book called Last Night a Superhero Saved My Life. It's essays,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Can you tell me about that book and about the essay that you wrote for it?
Sure. Yeah, that was when I was writing young adult for Simon Pulse back in 2014, 2015. That was my first YA book, was Servants of the Storm, which was a horror book set in Savannah about demons. And then I wrote a kind of thriller called Hit, about what would happen if a company bought up all of the debt in America and turned the children of debtors into bounty hunters and set them out to kill people. But that editor was doing this book called Last Night a Superhero Saved My Life, which is a series of essays around, the ways that superhero media has impacted your life in kind of deep ways. So I wrote about the Hulk, and it starts with, when I was little, I had this blow up doll of the Hulk that I used to beat up, and just the concept of anger and how it can get you through dark times.
Yeah. You don't seem to you seem to have gotten past your initial phase of not having any ideas.
Oh yeah, no. Once I figured that one out, it's I don't know, I feel like it's kind of like the first time you see the you know, those 3D paintings where you look at them for years and you're like, I don't see the sailboat. And then one day you're like, oh my God, it's the sailboat. And then you're like, now I can see every 3D painting.
It was right in front of me all the time, the
Yeah, it's
whole
right
time.
there. It's got to cross your eyes a little bit.
Let's see. So you've written under, I'm trying to find these.
Lila Bowen.
Yeah, Lila Bowen, the Shadow series. Tell me about
Yeah.
that.
So at the time, all of my books were with Simon. My Blood series was with Simon with Pocket, and then my YA books with Simon Pulse. So Orbit bought the Shadow series, starting with Wake of Vultures, and so they wanted me to use a pseudonym, you know, because that early in my career, I hadn't really had anything break out, so they didn't want to contribute to breaking me out for Simon, but they also, you know, wanted that little boost you get when you're a debut. So it's kind of an open secret. We never tried to keep it secret from anybody. Like, and Lila's, because if you call it, I'll look up because it sounds like Delilah. I didn't want to have to remember too much. But that was a really fun series that I don't think that I would attempt to write it today. But the message that we were getting in 2013 when I wrote it was that white writers need to be writing more people of color to help getting the reading populace ready to read about people who weren't just basic white girls. So the main character is a half black, half native girl who's kind of raised as a slave, who eventually just lives her life as a man and becomes you know, kind of a trans cowboy in this wild west where once you have killed you know, a supernatural thing, you see them all over the place, and it turns out that the Texas Rangers, that's what they were actually doing, was going around and killing all of the vampires and chupacabras and all of the bad things that were harrying these little small towns. So it's a very weird West found family monster hunt, I think is how my first agent put it when she was telling me that there was no way that she could sell it because no one would buy it. And then
And
they did.
then apparently that was wrong.
She said, I can only send it to 7 editors in the whole world. There's no second round. And if it doesn't sell, it will impact you badly. And I was like, well, I already got the tattoo, so let's just go for it.
And so you've got 4 books out there.
Yeah. That's my longest series.
Great.
And
Can I ask, are you getting any queries from like other media? For example, you're in comic books, novellas, and you're in novels and whatever, but have you gotten any like interest from, say, visual media,
I
film?
mean, it's so hard to sell that. You know, my agent works with film agents. I've sold rights to a couple things, but they haven't gotten far enough along where the general public has heard about it. We had Lady Castle. That comic was based around the Monty Python. What if Strange Women, Lion and Pawns was a great basis for a system of government? So it was kind of a medieval, you know, women take over the castle sort of thing. So we sold those rights for like a year, and we got pretty close. Like we had a script going out, and then I guess Disney bought Fox and just killed like every project that was on the table. So it's kind of hard with selling movie rights. Even when you sell rights, you know, you maybe have a 1 in 100 chance of it getting past, you know, that really excited initial phone call. So like it's hopeful out there. I've written a couple of scripts, and you know, it's, I guess I wrote a script I felt very strongly about. I sent it to my film agents, and the feedback came back was like, this feels gross and I don't want to do it. I'll just do novels. I know I can sell those. But I do enjoy writing scripts, and what, you know, that's, if I get too, when I get too boxed in by non-competes and I can't sell any prose, that's when I'll go back to writing scripts.
You know, it strikes me, and for the listeners, if you're listening to all this and you're like, okay, she sounds great, where do I start? And it's just I think the answer to that is really depends on your interests. For example, the Blood series, BLUD, the number one's described as the first in a steampunk paranormal romance series in which a woman is transported to a world filled with vampires and magic. So if you're into that sort of thing, you could start with that series. You know, if you're a Star Wars nerd, like I think everybody here is except for me, you could start there. And let's see, you've got some young adult books out as well,
Yep.
and a middle grade book out. So, and
Yeah,
then
I think
you've
I've got 5
go,
middle grade, 5 young adults. The Weird West books, the violence is my most kind of like literary work. I usually, when people ask me where to start, I ask them what their favorite book is, and I just kind of figure out what's closest to that.
right, exactly. Yeah. Um, Speaking of Star Wars, can you, Phasma is the newest one, right?
No, Phasma was the first one, but that is the
Phasma's
one
the first
that
one.
hit list and that I'm kind of best known for.
Okay. Well, can you tell me about that and then about the latest one as well?
Sure. So Star Wars Phasma came out before The Last Jedi. I actually they flew me out to San Francisco because I had to read the script, which was just wild. I'm at the San Francisco Presidio office. I had been taken to Java the Hutt, their coffee shop, and given a drink, and I'm handed the script, and it's got like notations in pencil and things scratched out, and it's in red, so you can't photograph it, and I'm not allowed to have any cameras or photograph. I can't do anything except for sit on this couch with my 30-ounce coffee and read this script and cry. Basically, it was an amazing kind of out of body experience.
That's great.
But that book kind of became Mad Max in the Star Wars world, is what we call it, Mad Max Fury Road, because it's basically we have to cross this desert to get to the ship before the other bad guys, and the whole book is based around seeing how Phasma became who she is and kind of explaining her actions in the movies and how she is so ruthless and how hard she is to kill. But it's all kind of told through a Scheherazade 1001 Nights style. So you're not in Phasma's head except for one chapter, but the rest of it is people telling stories about her. And it also it introduces Vi Marati, who is a resistance spy, but she is a character you can actually meet in Galaxy's Edge. She's a black girl with blue tips on her hair and an orange jacket. And so she sneaks around the Galaxy's Edge theme parks in Disneyland and Disney World, kind of like you can meet Chewie, or you can meet Rey, or you can meet, stormtroopers, you can meet Vi Marati. So that was extremely cool because she actually exists. She's like my Snuffleupagus. And I also,
go ahead,
I have this red helmet back here.
Let me put you Cardinal. On the screen here for everyone. There we go.
Yeah, this is Cardinal. He was a character created for Phasma that's kind of her foil who interrogates her.
Wow.
So that's kind of cool, where he has his own figure. He has a Black Series figure and then a helmet you can get for him. But he was very fun. He was kind of one of the first stormtroopers that was anything other than, white.
Yeah.
Or black, I guess they're the Death Troopers.
Did you create that character, or was it given to you to flesh out?
No, I got to create him. It was really cool. I mean, it's almost like a bargaining posture. You're at the table with 12 other people being like, I want a red stormtrooper. And they're like, we don't know if we can do that. And they're like, I think we can do that. I'm like, oh, you can do it. Let's do it. Do it.
That's great, because I see your first, one of your early novels was The Perfect Weapon, which is based on an obscure character in the first Force Awakens movie.
Yeah, that one was fun. That came out before The Force Awakens, and I thought I'd get to go read the script, or they'd send me like a story Bible or a book or something. And I was like, well, what information do I need? And they were like, well, there's a photograph from the Annie Leibovitz photo shoot, and that's all you get. You get to see this beautiful woman in her black and white costume draped over this big husky tusky pig man, and make up anything you want about her. And I was like, I've got all of my old Star Wars RPG books, and I'm like, okay, well, is this map still good? Is this still good? And they're like, no, none of that. Make everything up. And I was like, what? And I was like, well, please give me some information. And they said, okay, well, you can Google The Force Awakens spoilers. And I was like, I'm not going to do that, y'all. So that was my first time, getting to make a planet in Star Wars, being like, oh, I'm a god now. This is dangerous. Y'all just gave me this power.
Yeah. Feels good, doesn't it?
It does. It's so much fun naming stuff in Star Wars. And like Star Wars is it's like when Eddie Izzard talks about flags, everybody's got flags planted in Star Wars, and you're just grabbing every piece of ground you can.
Well, it's very cool that you got to play in that universe so much.
Yeah, oh, I love it.
Very cool. And then, of course, if you're listening and you're like, I'm not into Star Wars, but then, of course, the horror. We've talked a little bit about Bloom. I guess Violence just completely went under my radar. Can you tell us about that book?
Sure. The Violence is my kind of most commercial book clubby, literary work. Okay. But I grew up in a house with domestic violence, and the kind of idea seed for this book came around one time when I'd been on a panel at Emerald City Comic Con talking about violence against women, and I was just sitting in my room thinking, the hardest thing is that you can't fight back, because in general we are smaller and not as strong, and we're not trained to fight for the most part. We don't have our own weapons, and even if you do fight back against your accuser, you still end up in trouble. It's very rare that a woman wins in a fight against her accuser and gets to walk free and have a nice life. She usually ends up in jail. So it's like, if there was only some little loophole where a woman could actually exact her revenge. And so I was like, okay, what if there was a plague that kind of knocked you out like malaria, and you didn't know what you were doing at the time, so you weren't responsible for it, so they couldn't prosecute you. So for at least for a little while, there would be this super empty space where nobody knew what to do, and you could take whatever revenge you wanted and be like, "Oh, I was sick. I didn't know. I just beat him to death. It's not my fault." So basically the book was just whole predicated on like, how can I allow this woman to beat her husband to death for years and years of emotional and physical abuse. Um, so yeah, I invented a plague, and this sold right before COVID hit too. I don't know if it would have sold after COVID, but right before COVID hit. And then there's also a subplot that goes into pro wrestling. Um, but
because of course.
So it follows 3 generations of women, a mom, her teenage daughter, and her rich mother, as they are navigating this world in which anyone could just break out in random violence and beat you to death at Costco with a bottle of lotion.
Actually, in regards to the COVID thing and the plague that you invented, Paul's book came out, right in the middle of COVID? Is that right, guys? Something like that. Paul Tremblay. And it actually, I was surprised. He told me that it sold very well because
I mean,
I'm not
Chef
surprised
Wendig's Wanderers did too.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that a Paul Tremblay book sold well.
Yeah,
that's not what I'm saying, but he's like he kept saying to me in the interview, I felt bad, because then COVID hits, and it seemed like for a while there, people really wanted to watch movies or read fiction, about plagues. I don't know why that is. Maybe because in a lot of it, we didn't know what was going to happen when we were in the middle of COVID, really. And then in a lot of fiction, in one way or another, we overcome the plague,
Yeah, it was
So,
interesting writing this because I sold it on spec. So I'd written 20,000 words of it, and that's how it sold. And then I had to write it during that early period of COVID in like that March, April, May, where we were all kind of staying home. And so I'd be outside. I lived in Florida at the time, and I had an outside office. And like for 2 hours, not a single car would pass by because nobody was allowed to go anywhere. And we were all, going outside at night and clapping for the hospitals, and wearing masks, and it was a really interesting time. And so then by the time that my big revisions came back from my editor, we'd learned so much more about how people respond to plagues that I had to like go back and revise the book, because you're just like, oh, that part did not last. People just going to keep on going. They don't care.
mm-hmm.
So that was an interesting experience.
Looking back, it all seems so surreal, and at times not very real that we actually did this and got through this. Yeah. And, of course, the people one group that I feel the most sorry for are people like my son, because they're young. And then this thing that happens, once every couple of generations, if, at least happens to them when they're in these formative years. He didn't have a high school graduation or a prom, for example, because of this.
Yeah, my kid never got to be a freshman in high school.
Yeah, exactly, that sort of thing. So yeah.
They did a little box where they sent out a box to influencers, and there's a thing called the violence fighting ring, is the pro wrestling aspect of it. But somebody gets beaten to death with a Yeti cup, so this is the little thing that went in the influencer box. I love it.
By the way, you've got a great background there. Told you that before we started
you.
recording, but yeah. And also sounds like you've got a very supportive husband. Helped
So
you at
supportive.
least. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be a writer without him. He pushed me to it. Was like, you need to do this. You're good at this. You would be great at this. He's 100% supportive, and I'm so grateful for him. My first book, I was dedicated to him, and every now and then he'll get another one.
I can't figure out how to turn off the spotlight thing. Remove spotlight. There we go. And then
what are you writing currently?
There we go. Sorry.
Right now I am working on a secret unannounced project. I've got several.
You can tell us. I promise none of us will spill.
I've signed NDAs that would suggest that legally I can't do that, but I've got some cool stuff happening. I guess we're about to announce my next project that has recently sold. But like I said, next year I've got It'll Only Hurt for a Moment, which is about a woman who goes to an artist retreat in North Georgia and finds out that it is not the happy, fun yoga place she imagined. And then the other
is it a horror novel?
Oh yeah, it's horror.
Okay.
It's horror. And then the second one is called Guillotine, and it's the follow-up to Bloom. So it's one of those kind of like it's not a sequel, but it's kind of loosely related, just by women who kill people. But it's a kind of the Menu meets Follow the House of Usher.
So if you can't tell us what you're doing and you're just teasing us, why don't you tell us what have you read lately that you really liked?
Well, I do want to ask before she does
what
that.
did you watch?
I do want to ask real quick, in the future, without getting specifics, do you think you're gonna be staying mostly in horror, or are you gonna keep skipping around genres? Which is great.
I would really like to keep on with horror. The message I'm getting is that the horror market is oversaturated, and I might have to wait a while before I get to sell more horror, which I don't like at all. I have a couple ideas I'm really excited about that my editor has, kind of dragged feet on. So, looks like I might have to go back into writing some romance for a while. But yeah,
sorry. So when you're writing romance, does the horror just tend to creep over?
Oh yeah, that's there. I would never be able to write like a Hallmark movie. This one's got witches in it. There's always going to be some kind of violence or malevolence. Like I just can't write a straight happy, nothing weird. Everybody in here is safe. The worst thing that's going to happen is we're going to get in a fight at the Christmas tree lot. Like I can't do that. Like I have lived a violent life. I've never had a day that wasn't have some kind of, violence or threat in it. So like everything I write is just whimsical and dark. My middle grade books are, I guess I've been told that they are, what Camp Scare, they were like, we think this is too scary for middle graders. Do you want to change it? And I was like, nah, man, they can handle it.
So wait, you got an idea here for like a Hallmark type movie, but the ornaments on the Christmas tree in the center of town are all specific implements that demand to be used or that come out of your advent calendar.
So we're doing like a Needful Things Hallmark movie.
Maybe
I would write that. That'd be so funny.
The Batman, I know you can't talk about that, but are you allowed to say, is this a novel, or what are we talking about?
Oh no, here? It's I get to write a couple of issues for a different character that's going to be in like sometimes they just package various stories into the bigger ones. So I get to, write a story about a different character who's not Batman, but who will be kind of stuffed into a Batman.
In the comics? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, this is comics.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll keep an eye out for it.
So what are you reading lately that you enjoy? Yeah. Or what have you watched lately that you enjoy?
Reading, I try to really prioritize blurbing books, especially for new writers. So I just read a YA called The Merciless King of Moor High by Lily Sparks, who is a YA writer. She also wrote Teen Killers Club. So she, like me, she writes teen romance in the midst of violent horror. But it's another one of those books. It's like, I didn't know you could do this, where she's got an apocalypse you've never seen before, where kids have almost set up their high school. All the adults are dead and turned into something super horrible and threatening. And the kids have set up their high school like an Arthurian castle, with knights and with serfs and with the king. And it's violent and gory and strange and romantic. So I really like that one. I read A Botanical Daughter by Noah, I think maybe Noah Wright. That one is out with Titan, I think in February, but it is so fun. It's like if the guy from Good Omens made a Frankenstein out of plants. So it is beautiful and funny and creepy and weird. Like I'm a plant person. I love plants. Like I have my office plants over here. So I really enjoyed that one. See here, I have been reading Black River Orchard by Chuck Wendig. I really like Bride of the Tornado by James Kennedy. So yeah, I think those are the books that have really stuck with me lately.
So they're telling you horror is oversaturated. In their opinion, it seems like there's always a market for horror. I don't know.
I think so. It's publishing right now. I guess I've been in the game. My first book came out in 2012. This is the weirdest I've ever seen it. I'm getting such strange messages, and my friends are too. But I have been kind of selling on spec, where I'll sell on a pitch or on 20,000 words. And I think I'm getting back to the point where like, I want to write a whole book and then y'all can take it or leave it. But I'm not real interested in, I guess recently I've written, several, I'll write 10, 20,000 words of a book and have the editor go, oh, I don't know. And I'm like, that's my baby. Like, let me finish making my baby. So for my own sanity, I'm probably just going to, pick a horse and ride it and then find a home for it, as compared to trying to, get on my knees for an editor and beg them to believe in my baby.
So I don't know if this applies to the publishing world, because we've been trying to understand what's going on in the fantasy horror short series or movies that are coming out from the major networks. And there's this implication that the really high interest rates that are going to be sustained right now have made money too expensive to borrow. So previously you're recycling your debt at 2%.
Yeah.
You just keep recycling it. And now all of a sudden the debt has gone up to like 8%. And all the money that you had for shows has suddenly dried up to service the debt. That's a little technical, but I was wondering if there might be something going on similarly in publishing, that they just don't have as much ready cash as they did 5 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that we're seeing is with the death of Twitter, publishers are realizing that and the rise of kind of book talk, and the fact that you can't manipulate book talks, things have to happen there outside of you. You can't force it to happen. It has to happen naturally, or through who all, you can't like buy out the book talker influencer who only touts the books that they love, because people only trust them because they only tout the books that they love and they can't be bought. So publishing is starting to go, wait, I don't know if we know how to sell books. So we're seeing publishers are having less presence at Comic-Cons, and sending fewer authors to Comic-Cons, and the ones that they're sending, they're not supporting as much. We're seeing pretty confusing marketing plans where they don't seem to know what to do. They've kind of leaned on authors in the past and expected us to do a lot of our own branding, but now that we're seeing that Twitter is dead, they don't know how to reach people either. So it seems like no one really wants to face up to the fact that the only really way to sell a book for certain is to throw money at it, because that means that they have to bear the onus of that, and they've been kind of squirrely around accepting that for a while. So
is this major houses too, or just like small presses?
I only know about the big five. That's all I've ever really worked with, outside of, an anthology here or there. And even like my Titan books, Guillotine and Bloom, like they're distributed in America through Penguin Random House. So I'm kind of a big five only kind of person. But
yeah, it's a weird time. But
I basically have to, re-audition for my job every year, and it's becoming slightly scarier than usual.
Is there a property you want to take a swing at in the future, or are you going to drift towards more original work?
I have so many non-competes generally. I need to do IP for how fast I like to write, because if I'm not writing, I probably would have to get on antidepressants, which sounds annoying. So, I'll do Star Wars anytime they ask. I would love to do what we do in the shadows is one of my favorite properties right now. I really wish that was an IP I could be hit up for, because I would have, that's right. It's whimsical. It's dark. Like, it's my jam. I almost got to write a Transformers comic, a graphic novel. Big into the Transformers, especially James Roberts' run on the series. It's just one of the most amazing pieces of literature I've ever encountered. But I was right in the midst, like we had gotten the contract and my agent was like, oh, let me work on this some more before you sign it. And then IDW lost the license. And I was like, if we had just signed it, I could have had it. But also, they hit me up for interesting IP all the time. I did a Diablo short story recently that was super fun, that like was not something I would have gone looking for, but that was just, I love it. So there's all sorts of stuff that I don't even know until they ask. Although I begged for Labyrinth. Like when I found out Boom had somebody vaguely dropped, they might have a Labyrinth anthology coming up. I was like, I will do anything, because I was a Labyrinth kid.
Well, it sounds like to me that you it's natural to be nervous. We're all only human, but it seems like to me you've got maybe a lot less reason to be, because you've got your fingers in so many different pies and possible pies.
I'm like a raccoon. Like, I'm going to find a way to get to that trash. You just keep trying to lock the bin. I'm getting in there.
Yes, that's exactly the analogy I was going for. As an aside, you said you edited your husband's books. What does he write?
He hasn't written in a while. He has turned to music, which I totally respect, because I don't understand music at all. My third grade violin teacher threw a chair at me and told me I should probably quit playing violin. So I did.
Threw a chair at you?
Yeah, she threw a chair at me.
Jeez.
I was real bad. And you could throw things at children in the 80s. So yeah.
Wow.
No, he wrote kind of some noirish stuff, creepy YA. He jumped around too, but it was all kind of creepy and dark. Some Jim Thompson, like Jim Thompson meets The Shining, basically. But I started out kind of like that was when you print it out at Kinko's, and I'd go with a red pen, and finally I was like, "Would you just give me the file and let me fix this?" Because he hates editing. He would not do any editing. And I got to where I was like, oh, "Okay, I'm gonna fix this," and then I'd query for him, and that was still when you had to like mail a letter in an envelope.
Yeah.
So it was. I guess I had kind of like a a T-ball version of querying, in like 1999, where you get the writer's market and a big stack of notebook paper. But the world has changed.
Yeah. And it keeps changing. Well,
I did break up with him briefly for a while, and he wrote a book where I was the devil, so that was fun for me.
Seriously? Oh, maybe I think I need to read this.
Yeah, we broke up for a year. Oh, I wasn't allowed to read that one. I was just told. He was just like, "Yeah, you were Satan."
Is this on the market, or is this just like his revenge novel in the drawer,
I think it's kind of like when you have an infection and you got to bleed the pus out. I think that's what it was.
Ouch.
So I guess
in my first Star Wars story, I tried to kill him on a toilet as a joke, and Star Wars was like, "Let's not kill people on the toilet." And I was like, then he's going to be a middle manager, and I'm going to kill him at his desk because that's even worse. So yeah, he died. He died in Phasma.
So I guess it sounds to me like you've been to Comic-Con. Do you regularly visit certain conventions?
Oh God, I love them.
There, or what do you do?
Yeah, I absolutely love them because I'm super scared of people and I'm really introverted. But at a Comic-Con, I have a job and I kind of just move through, the large crowds. So I really enjoy them. I go to New York Comic-Con pretty much every year I can. I'll go to San Diego any year that they'll send me. I go to Dragon Con every year. I've done Phoenix Comic-Con a couple times, Emerald City. I used to do Denver, but I guess they're under new management and they basically cut the entire literary arm off where they don't even do literary stuff anymore. Which is a shame because Denver Comic-Con is amazing. Yeah, Denver. Yeah, so I just if anytime someone invites me to a Comic-Con and covers the travel, I'm usually pretty happy to go because I really enjoy it. And I write while I travel. I get a lot of work done then too. Like I write in airports and I write on airplanes, so it's not like I'm losing time.
Well, yeah, one great thing about travel and ideas is that you're not distracted by your normal life things. You're doing you're waiting, say, for a plane, or you're riding in a car or things like that.
Oh yeah, I mean, I got the idea for the violence like at a Comic-Con, and that's happened for other books too.
Oh, and what you said about being introverted. Yeah, a lot of people that we wouldn't necessarily guess are introverted are, but they're real on when they need to be. For example, at a Comic-Con.
Oh yeah, and then you go back to your room and you collapse, and they're like, "I don't want to see another person for a week."
Right. Yeah, I can relate.
There's also a difference between, if you sent me to Comic-Con not being an author, if I didn't have a job to do, I would not know what to do. Like, I need a job, I need a role to fill, or else I don't know my scripts, and I get very confused. So, I mean, I'm probably happiest at Dragon Con. They'll give me 15 panels, and I just power walk everywhere, and I'm happy as a clam.
Well, thanks for talking with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so the newest book is Bloom by DELILAH S. DAWSON. It's available in Kindle and hardcover. Check that out. And you've got a sort of sequel to that coming up, right?
Well, it's more like, I have another horror novella that is about, a woman who kills people. Loosely related.
I think
the violence is actually $5.99 on Kindle right now. So if folks are into that, the violence is pretty reasonably priced at the moment.
Yeah, and the reason why we have this book and future books is because your 17-year-old daughter requested more women serial killers, right?
Yeah, for Bloom. That's where it's dedicated to her.
Oh, that's nice.
And she's a baker too, so baking plays into it.
She's a baker? Is
that
what she wants to do with her life for a career?
She's also into robotics and programming, so I think it'll be more on the side. We both have a gluten allergy, which makes it kind of challenging to do anything except for own a gluten-free bakery. So
yeah.
Are you fans of the Great British Baking Show?
Oh yeah. I still need to finish yesterday's episode. I like to watch it while I'm eating lunch, so that's what I'll be doing during lunch today is seeing what they come up with for dessert week.
You know, it
Pretty
amazes
striking.
me how many times and ways you find to mention that show on a horror podcast, Matt.
It's like the best show ever.
It
That's
really
what he
is. And
says.
besides, I'll tell you what, if we were fans together, I would want to talk to you about this week's elimination.
I don't want to. Oh God, if it's Maddie, I'm gonna be so sad. Oh, I'm gonna be so sad. I love that boy.
I can't say a word because
Okay,
unlike
yeah.
Mike, I don't believe in spoilers.
I tell you,
I
have you
don't
seen the
believe in
TV show?
spoilers.
Have you seen the show Lords and Ladles?
Oh, no.
This is one of my very favorite shows. It was on Netflix. I don't even know if it got taken off, but basically they take three Irish, chefs, well-known chefs, and they send them to a castle. And one person is assigned to hang out with the family, learn about the castle and the history, and they find like a feast menu from like 1753, like something that happened at a feast in that castle, and they find the menu. Then the second one of the chefs gets assigned to, they have to gather the ingredients. So if they're having sheep eyeballs and aspic, they have to go kill the sheep and learn how to take out its eyes. Or, if they're having like chitlins, they have to go visit the pigs and find out where chitlins come from. And if they have to eat duck, they have to go out with the hunter and hunt duck on the land. So they have to find the ingredients. And then the third person has to cook in whatever ancient kitchen the castle has. They have to cook whatever is on that menu. And then they sit down and have a feast and talk about, why we don't eat sheep eyeballs and aspic. But it is beautiful.
I give it a go.
Well, my wife's really into Gordon Ramsay. All the latest Gordon Ramsay MasterChef stuff. I think the latest one is the United Tastes of America, something like that.
Yeah, I think I saw that one.
So yeah, she says Gordon Ramsay's her TV husband, so I can't say anything negative about Gordon Ramsay. So
all I hear is that when he actually goes to a restaurant, he is like super nice and tips well. So thumbs up for Gordon Ramsay.
Yeah, he's actually. It seems to me, just from kind of side watching with her, that if he's happy with your work, then he's really nice to you. You just can't stand stupidity. And then
You know what?
he does these kids shows that are kind of versions.
So sweet to them.
Yeah, he's always so nice to the kids, even the ones he has to kick out. He's like, give me a hug. You did a great job. It's really sweet.
Yeah.
It's a screen persona, plus everyone knows that in the kitchen, it's like everyone wants to be a cowboy. So they're all tattooed and cursing, so.
It's kind of like the persona that you put on for this show.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, Delilah, we're going to chat about a few other things. You're welcome to stay, or you're welcome to leave as well. But thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This has been super fun.
Yeah, and again, for those out there who are listening to this, whimsydark.com is Delilah's website. And then if you click on books, you can see a very organized list of books that we've been talking about. So, for example, like we said before, if you're into Star Wars, you can see those stories, and horror, you can see all that, and so on and so forth. So,
and also, I'm not on Twitter anymore because I hate it now.
yeah.
But I'm on Blue Sky and Instagram. So like, if you want to ask me, this is my favorite book, which of your books I'll talk to anybody if it's in good faith. Happy to answer questions there. Happy to help you pick a book to start with. Happy to, chat about pretty much anything in Blue Sky and Instagram, where I'm Delilah S. Dawson.
Yeah, I hope that Blue Sky takes off. Twitter is just such a dumpster fire that I've just been slowly ignoring it more and more,
Yeah. No, it used to feel really nice, and now it just feels gross.
Yeah. And it used to be, I would have some people say, oh, I'm not on Facebook. I don't want all that drama. And then other people would say the exact same thing. I'm not on Twitter. I don't want all that drama. So I'm on Facebook. But I don't know. Facebook seems fairly sane.
Facebook is drama with people that you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Drama with 600 bots and a bunch of randos who would love to ruin your day for literally no reason other than the lols.
Yeah. I don't know. I think Twitter's dead. It just doesn't know it's dead, and Musk doesn't know it's dead.
Yeah, I saw all of the list of the advertisers that pulled out yesterday, and it was like, I don't think this is sustainable, my dude.
Really? Well, that's why he wants all of us to pay $8 a month for the privilege.
I mean, if he's going to say such poisonous things, he deserves to lose the money.
Oh, he does. Yeah, I can't stand that guy.
He's boosting anti-Semites. I mean, what do you expect people to do?
Well, and look, nobody deserves $40 billion. I don't care what you did,
Well,
you know?
me.
Well, besides you, yes, of course. And Rick and Alan, but not me, you know. I don't know. It's just, Danielle and
You know
I,
what? I'm a generous man. I don't even need 40.
right. Danielle and I
Little
have
fun.
talked about this. What does he have? $40 billion. Imagine what the good you could do with just 2 billion for the
Yeah.
kids in this country, for example.
I'm thinking I'd build a house out of Twinkies.
Talking about helping people,
Do.
not helping you.
It'd make people happy.
Make you happy.
Make the birds real happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you, Delilah. Thanks for being here. It was really wonderful to chat with you.
Thank y'all so
So,
much. I really appreciate it.
all right. Have a good day. You
All right,
sticking
y'all
around or are
too.
you going to take off?
Oh, I've got to go feed a child.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
very
much.
much.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
I will tell you what, I wish I had her energy. Got a lot of energy. She is really fun to chat with.
Well, just, behind the humor, this is a person who is driven to write
Yeah.
and
And very talented.
say anything, write what she wants, but take a job from you and then sort of make it her own.
Right.
Cranks out a couple thousand words a day. That's pretty damn good.
And that she broke into the major publishing in recent years, and we're told that's not possible anymore.
Well, it's possible. It's just a lot more rare than it used to be, I think. But yeah, I can't wait to see what her Batman project or side project or whatever it is. And I didn't want to, question her too much about it, but it sounds like it's something that's going to come out in Detective Comics or Batman.
She wasn't going to tell us. You could be as nice as you want. She's going to hold that.
I didn't want to push her.
I actually was more interested. Like, I follow. I've never really been on Twitter, but I sort of been following its upheaval over the last couple of years of this sort of like corporate from a remove, but to see how this has screwed up other people's livelihoods by like now you can't use it to promote your book because the publishers and critics are not there anymore. So then there's suddenly no venue to push new authors.
Well, you're talking about a guy, Elon Musk, who just plows through life, not really caring at all, even noticing about the lives he upends. He took over Twitter and immediately started, driving it into the gutter. But he thinks he's a genius. So anyway, Alan, could you go over real quick explain the cosmic? I'll have a link to it. The Cosmic Horrors Jam 2, Cthulhu Lovecraftian games, and what this is, the Horror Jam.
Sure. On Itch.io. Itch.io is a website where you can developers, small, I don't want to call them amateur, but just publishers, developers of games can create games, short games. They're generally free, although they do have a paid platform and you can tip people, but there's so many games on there. And let me bring it up. I have a list.
51, I think.
Yeah, they just finished a Cosmic Horror Jam 2. This is the second year they did it, and it's a number of games. I'll send you a link and you can put it in the show notes. And it finished, and there are games that are on a variety of themes. I think the top two games are really good.
What are those? Is that the two at the top?
Yeah, the two at the top.
Echoes and Eldritch Desire, and then Shutley and the Artifact Heist.
Yeah, and then there's the other ones, the other Echo game that's a little farther down. Let me go to mine. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I forgot to say I was going to ask you this, so I should have.
Yeah, just give me a second to bring it up.
I like this title. It's not a cult.
Yeah, actually, I've got it here right now. So yeah, the Echoes of an Eldritch Desire and Echoes from Willowbrook. That was the game that I really enjoyed.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, Echoes from Willowbrook. They're they're like 90s. They look like games from the PlayStation 1 era, and you can play them in the browser or download them. Several of these games are Mac compatible. So I know that that's something you've also voiced a desire for. And yeah, there's
and most of these are free, right?
Most of them are, well, all of the games on the Cosmic Horror Jam are free. That's one of the requirements. They had to build the game in less than a month, and it has to be free.
I like this title. I Miss Humanity. So anyway, I'll include a link to this if you're in the mood to play a Lovecraftian game, and here are a bunch of games you can play and not spend a dime. So.
No, now if you want a game that is not free that I've been playing lately, it's Alan Wake 2. And
yeah,
so I've got a lot of good things to say about that game.
Did that just come out?
Can you tell us about it a little bit?
Yeah.
I mean, what is it?
It's equal to a 2010 game, and it's the 2010 game was considered one of the best cosmic horror games of the last generation. Alan Wake's a writer who's suffering from writer's block, and while on vacation, his wife disappears. And it was a very Stephen King influenced, very much like a plot of a Stephen King book. But the second game that's, and the studio that developed it, they've put out some other games in that universe, and they've moved definitely into a kind of their own space. It's a cosmic horror game that really breaks a lot of boundaries. It's got live action in it. There's a musical sequence. It's really just a unique thing to experience. I'm really pleased with it. It's going to win a lot. It's going to win a lot of awards this year.
Should people play the first Alan Wake game, or does it matter before they play Alan Wake 2?
I would probably read a synopsis. It is it's an older game. You can find remasters of it, but it begins with a new character. You spend half the game playing as a different character, an FBI agent, in this small Northwest town. So Twin Peaks is also a touchstone for the game.
Well, I think I'm going to get it then. And Alan just completed a list of Lovecraftian games for the Lovecraft Easing website. If you go to lovecrafteasing.com, click on Lovecraftian games. We've had this page on the website for a while, and Alan's, well, I would say remastered the list, freshened it up with newer games and took off some games. It's not meant to be a comprehensive list. It's meant to be as a list of games that Alan thinks these are the games that are worth your attention.
I think the list is about 30 right now. 30 games. And I'll grow as new things come out, but it's if anybody has a suggestion, I think they can comment, and if I miss something, let me know.
Yeah. So yeah, check that out. So thanks for doing that, Alan. Let me open this. Sorry. Oh, so speaking of, excuse me. Speaking of Lovecraftian games, thanks to DeBronzo, I know about this one. But Cthulhu, Velvet Paws on Cthulhu's Trails. It's another Call of Cthulhu game from Sandy Peterson. So I don't know if it's out yet, but yeah, looks pretty good.
Involves the different cat goddess fast. he came out with new figures. That we had
Oh,
sort
really?
of cat fraction in Call of Cthulhu. Cats from Mars, cats from Saturn, cats from Jupiter.
Anyone see that?
Is that for Cthulhu Wars, Rick?
Yeah, he had that Bubastis faction.
Hmm. Did you guys see that Madame Web or Madam Web movie trailer?
Yeah. So my
I've never
understanding,
heard of this character.
this character is old timey in Spider-Man, and she basically was an older woman, one of those kind of lives out by herself like a witch or something. And she used these powers to weave back through time short distances a few times to help Spider-Man. So this is my understanding. It's like, okay, but what they've done is they've taken this minor character and now they've made her a main character in her own series, and they've made her a young woman. So did you ever read The Scar by Chena Millville? There's a character there. It's like I got so many problems with his books, but he's got this character that has a weapon called a possibility sword, where if he activates it, like he's fighting this very difficult warrior, but it just turns out there's one pathway through time where if the sword had done this, deviated that, parried there, and suddenly it's through the guard and you've killed your enemy. And that's kind of like what I view these powers as, is these are possible outcomes of the future. And by going through one, she can see that's bad, and then she can choose a different thread to follow, if I'm understanding this correctly.
Sort of like the Dead Zone TV series.
Right. So it sounds kind of interesting. I thought the trailer was pretty well done.
I thought it was.
It also has 3 Spider Women in the comics.
Well, in this trailer, I thought the trailer was good too. But who's this Spider-Man looking guy that's the antagonist?
He's the bad guy, apparently. They reworked from the comics. He's going back in time and trying to prevent these women from becoming spider-type superheroes.
He looks like a spider-type villain.
So Rick, are those in other comics? Those women are become a Spider-Man kind of figure?
Become a Spider-Woman type figure.
Okay, so
2 of them were. One is the current Spider-Woman. One was the previous Spider-Woman. One was the character who has Spider-Woman-like powers, but has a different name.
So, one thing I'm glad about, though, is that this is going through Sony and not Marvel, because it seems to me like Marvel can't do anything well at the moment. And so maybe it's better this is going through Sony, or they're more focused on saying, instead of like, ta-da, here's a shiny new character, we're just going to instead say we're going to have a good script first.
Imagine that. Yeah.
More stuff.
3 movies come out.
Which sale?
Next year, Kraven the Hunter and Venom 3.
No, I mean Morbius is let's hope it's not that, but
I can dream, can I?
Anyway, it looks interesting. Does anyone know when the movie comes out?
No, you know what? I'd say take it all with a grain of salt unless it's release weekend. The way things have been going, the way money's been sucked up by all
February 14th, 2024.
Right. I'm going to wait. Like if someone in our little group sees it and recommends it, then I'll go see it. Otherwise, yeah. I cannot bear to go to these superhero movies anymore.
Well, Morbius was such a letdown that I'm not going to risk it. I might risk it on the Venom movies because both of those were good.
And there's also a Kraven movie.
Yeah, the Kraven movie. We'll see how that turns out.
I'll check them all out in the theater of my home. Speaking of superheroes, look at what Kelly sent me. This is history of Gotham, 1919 through 1939.
It's based on a website.
Is it? It's really cool. Reimaginings of Batman and characters from the Batman universe. There's Alfred Pennyworth, and not just the photographs, but the complete complete histories. Check that out, Rick.
Yeah.
Yeah, just out of the blue, it arrived. He's like, I'm sending you something you're gonna really, really like, and it's taken a while to get there. So it's pretty cool. Thank you, Kelly. So, and then Pete Rawlik has a children's book coming out soon.
Yeah, great. I mean, Pete around children.
Yeah.
With his like,
Called The Spontaneous Generation.
it looks like it won't be creepy at all.
Yeah, no, it won't be creepy at all. Here's a couple. If you're watching on YouTube, here's a couple.
Oh my Lord.
One day, one morning, the monsters just appeared.
So, we're going to have to talk to Pete about this.
Yeah.
Kids look like they came from Village on the Dam.
Yeah. They just appeared, mewling, naked, helpless infants, which I suppose was part of the strategy. They didn't look like monsters. They didn't look like monsters at all. They looked like us. They looked exactly like us. So, yep. Very cool Pete Rawlik project there.
That tangentially, you can see a similarity to the movie Vivarium.
Changeling.
Yeah.
Changeling. What else?
I've got something.
All right.
Stephen Graham Jones wrote a Conan novella.
Really?
It's available from Titan Books. It's about $1.99 on Kindle.
I missed the title.
It's going to be it's Conan, Lord of the Mound.
Oh, Conan
of the Mount. Mount. Lord of the Mount by Stephen Graham Jones. And it's possibly the best Conan pastiche I've ever read.
Wow.
It's vying against Carl Edward Wagner's Conan novel, Lord of Kings. But it's an excellent novella.
The only downside I see is I don't see it on any other forum except Kindle.
Probably only on Kindle. They're coming out with Solomon Kane and Conan novellas. There's also it's not done by Titan Books, though, even though they're doing Solomon Kane later on in the month. There's a novella by Nancy Collins, who wrote the Sonia Blade vampire novels. And she has the Death Heads Tavern, Solomon Kane. And that's very good, too.
So this Conan story, you said it's $1.99 on Kindle right now by Stephen Graham Jones.
It's about 34 pages in print.
And what was the title again?
Lord of the Mount.
It's not expensive at all.
It's with a T at the end.
I'll be happy to get a copy. I wish there was a print copy, but looks to me like it'd be something I want to read.
I thought you read a lot on your phone.
That's if I'm at work and I got time during lunch.
It's a very engrossing read. It moves very fast.
Okay.
Titan also has a comic license now.
Oh.
So they'll probably put out a collection of a print collection of the stories.
Sure.
Well, hopefully no one can tell, but I'm really, really under the weather today. So probably going to wrap up here shortly, but, thanks for listening to the show. If you're listening to the show and that's all you do, I definitely appreciate it. If you really want to help continue, then the Patreon is the best way to help. And we do a lot of Patreon podcasts for just $5 a month, and then the rewards get better the higher up you go. But again, thanks to everyone who does that, everyone who keeps the podcast going. I really appreciate it. And last but not least, we talked about this in the Patreon podcast the other night. Godzilla, the series on Apple, right, guys?
That's the Monarch Legacy of Monsters series.
Yes. Yeah.
It's superb, and its human characters are great.
So, oh wait, this is already showing?
Mm-hmm.
I was still waiting for it to come out.
There'll be a third episode dropping Wednesday.
It's on that network that you've been bitching about.
Well, I'm gonna have to get it anyway to watch some other shows, but
Changeling. You got to watch the Changeling. It's good.
Okay, but we're on Godzilla, and we all know in December what drops is Godzilla -1, which you're all waiting for.
Yeah, well, the trailer looks awesome, and I'm not a big Godzilla fan, but it looks awesome. In fact, the series looks awesome.
Well, what's unique about the Apple TV Legacy of Monsters is this is a Godzilla universe series where you care about the people. You didn't care, like in Godzilla King of the Monsters, I didn't give a damn about the human characters.
Yeah,
I would go further to say I wanted to see them get squished.
well, I've seen the first 15 minutes of the Apple series, and in the first 15 minutes, there's got John Goodman and this huge spider monster, and then a bigger spider monster, and I'm like, this is awesome. I love it. So, and Kurt Russell's in it too. I didn't know that.
And his son
Playing the same character.
playing the same character at different time periods.
Yeah.
It does that very well. They shift from the 50s to 2000 to 2015 very easily. And it's got a great human subplot going on there.
Well, I love in the taxi ride the apparently
My client Kendra lives in this beautiful house in Beverly Hills that I designed.
Sorry, it's just I tried to mute something and it didn't work. I was looking up to see how I could get to. There's an easy way for me to get to Apple TV.
The character, she's in a taxi, and apparently she's lived through some sort of Godzilla or huge monster attack in San Francisco.
Yeah, that was
and the
first Godzilla movie.
Right. And the taxi driver's telling her how, oh, that's a hoax. I've got a podcast about this.
But it's lovely. You get further on, you're going to see what Tokyo is like after a Godzilla attack. How it's changed how people live in Tokyo.
Can you jump right into this series if you've not really followed the Godzilla movies or watched them at all?
Maybe. I don't know how it's going to progress.
How many episodes are out right now?
2, and the third one drops on a Wednesday. I think that'll be in the evening.
Okay. All right. Well, I might be actually finally watching a Godzilla show. The last Godzilla I remember watching, I think I was 5. I was terrified at Godzilla, at black and white Godzilla, plowing through buildings and eating people. So,
or lecturing his son in Son of Godzilla.
Now, the John Goodman character is the John Goodman character from the King Kong movie, Kong of Skull Island.
Oh yeah.
So you may want to see that before.
I actually have seen that. It's been a few years, but I've seen that one.
But then you don't know about it.
Okay. All right. Well, prize, Matt.
Yes. So just remember, there is no Lovecraft Easy Movie Night on the 25th of November. But if you want to win this week's prize, which is a nice paperback copy of Visions from Brightchester from PS Publishing, early mythos stories of Ramsey Campbell, send an email to easyprizes@gmail.com and put Visions in the subject heading. We'll draw a winner in about 6 weeks.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks everybody for watching and listening. We'll see you next week. All right. Are you guys going to be here next Sunday? That's Thanksgiving weekend.
Probably.
Okay. All right.
By then,
I'll be
the
here.
kids should have left,
You'll kick the relatives out by then?
I'll be back from the road by then.
All right.
Are you going to visit your daughter college?
She's coming down, but I'll be taking her airport on Saturday, I think. So.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks everybody for watching and listening. And then I guess we will see you next week. So.